The first question is, does your business model need capital?
Yep.
It's not just something that you should start with, I need capital to do this, but rather
Love it. We have got lots to talk about, Ben.
between sort of 50 to 70,000 independent restaurants. What's the problem? Every day they've got to order from a whole bunch of suppliers. Call the fruit veg guy, they'll text the seafood guy. And so when we talk about FoodByUs, that is the problem that we're trying to solve. Chefs prefer to talk face to face, and they don't inherently trust technology. They trust people, they don't trust technology. It's one of those weird things as a founder where you've got absolute conviction in what you're doing until you don't. And then you've got conviction in this other thing.
Yeah. What have you learnt about yourself, your personality, and the benefits of co-founding?
Sales strategy 1 is mirroring, I think, the industry and how it does things. Strategy 2 is really understanding how do I speak way in a language with the person I'm targeting without bamboozling them with words like marketplace, tech. They don't want to hear that. Other thing I'll say in the hospitality industry in particular is the team and building it has been something I'm very proud of. I think that's helped grow me as a leader, but also in my non-work life. If you're CEO, you're going to hear everyone's problems, everyone's ambitions, how do they think about their life and the kind of journey that you go on with your team. And I think that's really important for founders or for anyone in how we give back. What I've tried to do and what I think is really interesting, and I really enjoyed hearing your version of this, is
Welcome to Chew the Fat. I'm absolutely obsessed with high performance and business. So I sit down with incredible guests and we talk about what it takes to be at the top. This is part of my mission to raise $1 million for children's cancer by running a cookbook called Eat with Purpose. I've got one ask for you. Share the content. The bigger the audience, the bigger the impact. Let's get stuck in. So as you know, part of my mission to raise $1 million for children's cancer by writing a cookbook called Eat with Purpose is I cook for every guest prior. Today I was told you love pasta.
yes.
Now my challenge here is I'm not supposed to be having carbs before 12, but I made an exception because this looks delicious.
Yeah.
So today what I have for you is a little dish from Sicily. So we have a roasted eggplant and tomato pasta with a touch of ricotta.
Looks delicious.
Get stuck in.
Thank you.
Now I have one question for you. And the question is, if you have to think back to the memory of food, the first thing that comes to your mind, the most special memory of you eating a dish, where are we?
Most precious memory of food is in the home, right? I think for me, it was just probably as a kid, I liked to bake. I don't know how I got into it. I couldn't even tell you. I don't remember.
Love that.
Yeah, my mum would just let me, I guess, muck around in the kitchen and just make like everything unhealthy.
Yeah, nice.
Shortbread, fudge, like all these sorts of things. And yeah, probably suits my personality type of baking. Like it's quite specific. You do the thing, you get the outcome.
Yeah, nice.
That's just something, if I think back from when I was younger, I just enjoy.
Ben, let's finish this up and then we'll get stuck into the interview.
Ben Lipschitz, welcome to Chew the Fat.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, where I'd love to start for the audience is, what are a couple of moments in your childhood that really shaped the person you are today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, I would, like most people, start with my family. So I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. And when I was about 2, and they were a bit older, obviously, my folks immigrated from South Africa to Australia.
Oh, we're in good company here, Ben.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm a South African too. So keep going, tell me more.
Oh, right. Cape Town or?
Cape Town.
There you go, Cape Town. Okay, you know the city well. Okay, so, if you're asking sort of how that shaped, I guess, and my parents were always there and they've been great parents and I want to make that public, but certainly being, on the tail end of an immigration and being the youngest of 3 kids, a bit more of a hands-off approach, just more relaxed. How did that shape me? I think I was just allowed to kind of, do what I wanted to do, explore what I sort of was interested in a bit more. In fact, my eldest brother likes to say, part of why you've been an entrepreneur and how you're sort of able to go do these things is because I had to do the more traditional stuff, which he did, and he sort of went into accounting and all of that. So I think that's sort of, I guess, upbringing and place in the family and place in like my family's history, I guess, really kind of helped shape some of the stuff I've done today.
Amazing. And what's the dynamic like between your brothers? And one thing I'll just quickly add, from South Africa, I moved. I have 3 brothers and I'm the youngest.
So there you go.
So worlds colliding. I like this.
Yeah.
What's that relationship like?
Yeah, well, we're all very different. And I think that is good and bad. I think over time we've sort of learned each other's differences a bit more. There's some topics I just, I won't bring up with my brothers. That's fine. But we're very, I think, a tight family, a family that respects each other, a family that, catches up very often. But yeah, I mean, both of my brothers, more traditional, I would say, in their career, more sort of, finance, accounting, corporate, I might say. And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But for me, I mean, I did sort of 5 minutes in a law firm and it was like, nah. And that was it, yeah.
Love it. For the audience that doesn't know, like, what is FoodByUs? Like, give me a top level view of like, what is the business that you're in today?
Yeah. I mean, you're a former chef, so I feel like you'll understand the problem. But most people don't realize that in a restaurant, and I'm not talking about McDonald's or Guzman y Gomez. I mean, those places have very nice procurement processes. But in Australia, I mean, there's sort of between sort of 50 to 70,000 independent restaurants. What's the problem? Every day they've got to order from a whole bunch of suppliers, and I mean like 15. How are they doing that? Well, they'll call the fruit veg guy, they'll text the seafood guy. The meat guy's got an app, but it just lets you order from him. So it's fine for that purpose, but you're talking about totally non-unified way of procuring. Prices are very opaque. And so you've just got this big challenge of what am I spending on my food? How am I ordering it? And how do I improve that part of my business? And so when we talk about FoodByUs, that is the problem that we're trying to solve. And we do it with really good software that basically helps get everything in one place. And it's got a whole bunch of features, like it integrates with accounting packages. There's a marketplace in case you want to check that you're getting the best sort of pricing. That's what we do.
Love it. We have got lots to talk about, Ben.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of worlds colliding here. Yeah.
There's many different segments, and I'll step back for one position, which is, for the people who are listening, it's like, oh, okay, cool, but I'm not going to get into hospitality. What I want to do is just make sure for everybody listening is, in essence, you're in a marketplace. You're in a what I would consider like an old school industry, which is, the chefing world. I feel like I'm allowed to say that because I used to do it. Yep. And they're doing things in like the old way, which is writing on bits of paper, taking photos, sending it to their suppliers. There's lots of suppliers, lots of emails. When I was in the day, it was lots of fax. Like fax was still banging. Like it was.
Fun fact, fax is still alive and kicking.
Love that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so what you're doing is you're creating a marketplace, which is all of these suppliers, the restaurants, and creating the tech that brings them two together. So for anybody listening, it's like, there are many versions of this in different sectors. And what's really interesting is like you look, before we met, before I knew about the business, I was always like, the restaurant game is ripe for this. Like it's perfect for it. But my challenge I had in my mind is like, I know how stuck in the ways people can be when that's been like ingrained into them. So for the marketplace, we have this challenge, which is like the chicken and egg. What comes first? Is it that I go and get all the restaurants, all the suppliers? So bring me into the process of like, how did you go and solve the marketplace complication? Because it is really complex, but once you get there, it's like beautiful symbiosis.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah. Okay. Great point. And I think the first thing I want to raise, which you've sort of touched on, is that every marketplace is different. It's operating in a different industry and it's got its nuances, I think, in how does it add value to that industry? And in some ways, especially in FoodByUs' way, how does it add value to the industry above and beyond just choice, above and beyond just the marketplace? And so I think it's two things with regard to your question. And I'll deal with the marketplace second. The first thing is, how do you really add value to the restaurant so that they just want to use the software is point one. Because the marketplace can come a bit later and provides choice and has all of these benefits. But I would say that it's necessary, it's not sufficient. And so when we talk, I think in the first instance, it's just taking a step back, what are the problems that the chef is facing or the owner of that restaurant? Opaque pricing, not knowing who ordered what, not integrating with the accounts packages, all of these different things. So I think point one is, how is this system helping them be better at procurement? And you probably know this, but generally speaking, you've got a third of your cost of a restaurant is rent. Yeah. A third is wages. Can't really touch those two. Third is procurement costs or your food costs. And that's normally where profit is made or broken.
Yes.
So it cannot be understated what a big problem this is or challenge for the venue. So that's kind of thing number one. But then you asked about the marketplace, and that's the chicken and egg. So let's say I've got something that can help you. It's a software platform. By the way, one of the features is that we've got a marketplace. Great. How do they search? Is it a race to the bottom? No, we don't just want to pay sort of the cheapest price for our fruit veg. You worked at a really nice establishment and it's not somewhere that you just sort of want to go straight to the bottom. So what are the choices of suppliers? How can they help me? When is a delivery going to come? What's the quality of the goods? And then you go to the supply side and they say, well, I don't want to serve that place. The drop size, as in the minimum order, is not going to be high enough, or they're in a place that I don't usually deliver. And so typically it's starting with the demands of the venue. What do you want? Who do you want it from? Cool, I've got 8 of the 10 that you want. These other 2, give me a minute. Then you go back to the supplier and say, I've got an opportunity for you. You've not yet heard of FoodByUs, but you supply really high quality, say, poultry. This particular venue really wants you, and I've got X many thousand more. Would you want to come onto the network? And so you're constantly darting between the two sides. And as you said, eventually that flywheel kicks in so that the restaurant of tomorrow eventually comes on and says, right, you don't have 8 out of 10 of what I want. You got 10 out of 10. And that makes everything a lot more efficient. You can close deals faster. You can see the spend go up, all the things that you probably know as a marketplace operator.
Yes.
But certainly in FoodByUs, it's those two things together. It's insufficient to just say, I've got choice for you. And it's also insufficient to just say, here's a sort of software that will help you.
I love it. It's a really good takeaway you've just done. And again, to help everybody who's listening is, I feel like a marketplace is this, a lot of people look at it's like the Golden Goose, people would go like, they think about this and they go, that's a marketplace. And it's really complex to get a marketplace done.
Yeah.
But what you've just been able to do there is kind of distill down like the key pillars of what you need to tick off before you can get to that place, which ultimately helps you with your chicken and egg. Because from what I heard, it's like we start with the restaurant. We need to create them value regardless.
Yes.
Regardless of their choice of the here, because I just need to create efficiencies in your business. Yeah. So the point one for me, for the audience there is like, you got to truly know your customer and know the problem. And once we can start to solve some of that, then the logical on-flow is the suppliers, which are the poultry, the meat, and all those other options.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like, and I'm going to take a step back for 1 second. It's like, how did you come up with this is the problem that you wanted to solve?
Yeah, really just happened upon it. I would love to tell you, I absolutely saw an insight. No one else saw it. So the original idea was homemade food. So it was sort of, at the time, Airbnb was doing it for accommodation and Uber was doing it for transport. And we sort of thought, why is no one allowing Ben to make a meal and sell it to Frank? And that's where we really begun. But we really found that as a marketplace approach, people would come, have a sort of test, but they weren't really driven. I guess we weren't solving a problem enough. People could use HelloFresh or just go to the supermarket or just eat out. There's so many options for a consumer. And so at the same time, we had restaurants and cafes kind of calling us saying, we saw someone making homemade cookies or muffins. I want to put that at the front of my cafe. So we started in baked goods and we started weirdly connecting homemakers of baked goods into cafes. And then very quickly, hang on, what's going on here? Everything stuck. Cafe ordered way more volume and repeatedly compared to say, my friends or family who were just testing it for a Thursday night lasagna. And that's really was the insight is, hang on a minute, cafes and restaurants need to order food. Yes. It's incredibly fragmented in how they do that. Having access to choice matters to them. Well, why are we just doing baked goods? Let's get fruit, veg on it. And, the rest kind of writes itself. So it was far from an insight. It was really listening to customers. And to be honest, the first 20 or 30 cafes that rang us and said, do you do wholesale? We said, nope. Just kept saying no. And eventually I said, hang on, I can't keep saying no. Yeah.
Okay. That's really, really interesting and super cool because I think I see this as a common challenge to a lot of people who want to enter a space is they'll go, it's like, I've got this idea and they go and like do it without seeing and identifying a problem. So not talking about what you did in the beginning was that you're creating something, but then through the process of creation, you then learn the problem. So like once you immersing yourself in that world, you go, oh shit, like there's something here it's not the same as what we did, but it fundamentally works on the same kind of principles.
And tech stack.
So
we already had tech that dealt with people buying and people selling.
Very cool.
And so we knew all we had to do was substitute people buying for restaurants and people selling for wholesale suppliers. And so we really didn't have to change the tech all that much. And I think that was the key is the effort to pivot. I mean, I hate that word, but that's really what we did. It was quite low. Yeah.
And talk to me about that because there is you know, it is a challenge. Like as an entrepreneur founder, like when you do believe in something and have conviction, and you are getting market signals, but you're like, no, like I got to stay the course.
Yeah.
Like how long did it take? And was there like a bit of like, oh no, like it's not the journey I'm on, or were you like pretty nimble to make that change and go like, oh no, clearly the market's saying this.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I mean, you just have to be driven by the data.
Yeah.
It was that simple. So the key metric for us in the beginning was repeat purchases. I think that's, you know, for most businesses, especially marketplaces. And so what was happening is, you know, consumers were coming for a bit, couple of meals, dropping off. And like I said, cafes were coming and just repeat ordering. And so we said, yeah, you know, we were passionate about homemade food and we thought we could kind of crack it as the new sort of Airbnb or Uber. But here's a bunch of customers who are just voting with their dollars and continually saying, I want this. And that was it. It was within the first year of the business.
Wow.
And I think, you know, it's one of those weird things as a founder where you got absolute conviction in what you're doing until you don't. And then you got conviction in this other thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I'm just laughing at myself. I tell an idea and the next day I was like, what about that idea?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That's gone. Oh, no, I got one data point. That's over.
Yeah.
Did you raise capital for this?
Yeah, we did. So important for a marketplace. I mean, you know, you've got to build it. The chicken and egg can take a long time and you got to build all the tech out. So, yeah.
Share with us some of the insights. Your previous business, which we'll kind of touch on shortly. Did you raise capital for that as well?
No, I didn't. My previous business was in footwear and I started at 24 and frankly just didn't have the confidence.
Perfect.
I did not want to take anyone's money. I was terrified that I would just lose it straight away.
So share with me the insights of the capital raising journey, because I think a lot of people listening either are wanting to do it, are about to open a business or looking to scale. Like share with me, like what were the expectation of, okay, I'm going to go raise capital, to like the reality of like what that looks like and what it meant for your business.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think and I sort of touched on it, is the first question is, does your business model need capital?
Yep.
It's not just something that you should start with, I need capital to do this, but rather, does what I want to do really need this? And if you're talking tech and marketplaces and we know we're going to burn a bit of money before we even see one sale, then, you know, that's important. But if you can avoid it entirely, then, you know, bootstrap, do it yourself, find your customers, find that cash flow and profitability, because you'll always, I think, have a more in control and freer business. Having said that, if you've had the decision, okay, I do need capital, I think a lot of it is, you know, the usual things as to, well, what's the market we're addressing? Like, why do we need this capital? And what's our business model? So we are addressing food. It's a massive $20 billion opportunity just to get one supplier to supply one thing to one venue. Well, I've got to build a whole platform for that. So that's what we need the money for. But hey, if we get a flywheel going, you know, this is the prize. And really just finding, I think, investors who believe in you, believe in your story, and I think can see, okay, in the long term, this is an idea and these are founders that I want to back. And that's really important because, as I've already said, it's a squiggly line.
Yeah.
It's really not linear,
no.
or at least not in my experience.
Not at all. No.
And so when you think about that, you know, you want investors, I think, who really do back, okay, we see the vision and we're kind of going there with you. Because if they start to get, I think, cold feet or they're just not sure or they're impatient, it can really weigh on you as a founder.
Totally.
Yeah.
Have you gone through multiple rounds?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that like a continuous journey? You've done the flip to profitability? Like, are you able to share some of those insights? Only whatever you're comfortable with?
No, of course. Look, I think that, so we were founded in 2016 and we really didn't get going till 2017.
Yep.
And I'm saying that because obviously we had COVID in the middle and then we had zero interest rates where money was easy.
Yep.
And then more recently we've had a bit of tightening in the venture capital scene. And so I think all of that is relevant to our journey, which is just to say, I think it's a combination of where are you in the business? Did you do what you said you would?
Yeah.
Did we get enough restaurants? Were they transacting enough? Is there repeat purchases? You know, how is this marketplace concept growing? But honestly, that's kind of half the story. The other is what's going on in the macro environment.
Totally.
How bullish are investors? Are interest rates at zero and everyone's into crypto or whatever?
Yeah, the everything bubble.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's super important because you spoke about cash flow and profitability, and what we've observed just during our short journey, just a few years, is that can change quickly and it can change in a way that's nothing to do with your business. And so I think it's always important to have a plan in your mind or just filed away somewhere, which is if the winds change and my investors themselves are going to change their approach, either just because they have or because there's a macro change. What am I going to do about it? And then, so the right things, I think, is to have revenue and a cost base that you can cover and sort of things that you can do, which along the journey you say, okay, I will always be able to control this, or I'll always be able to, I think, keep this thing going. That's really, really important.
That's hugely important. I think we've got many examples of those ones that are going for the hyper growth, raise 50 mil, and then the environment changes. Like it was literally like the everything bubble to the taps turned off, and the businesses who didn't have, if the delta, the gap between their revenue and their cost base was far too great.
And it's a bit of a treadmill, right? And you're on it, and you feel kind of almost unstoppable, and you want to deploy that capital. In fact, you're encouraged to by the investors. They didn't give it to you to just sit on. What are you doing? Well, you're taking on new initiatives. You're hiring new staff. You're entering new markets. That's expensive. And if you got a 180 on that, you just, as a founder, you're the only one who could really know, as you said, these are the things I need to do to bring it back in line. Super important. And unfortunately, in the last few years, we've seen companies who just weren't able to do that. And it's sad to see, and it can be really brutal.
Share with me some of so I guess in a high level nutshell, you touched on the first business was footwear. And ultimately, I imagine, I'll put myself in the similar shoes. I started when I was 20. I had no idea what I was doing. And you started at 24. Is like, share with me a bit of that journey just at a high level, and then the key lessons that you learned that you think have really helped, FoodByUs be to where it is today.
Yeah. You mean from my first business?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think at 24, I just had all the confidence and no idea. The idea really just came about because I was out with some friends. We noticed that there were girls walking around without shoes on because they had taken their high heels off. And we sort of thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if they had a foldable flip-flop or foldable footwear to kind of unfold and walk home in comfort? So just a simple observation. 24, we sort of thought, we're geniuses. This no one's ever seen this problem before.
Start searching for your private jets. You're like, here we go.
Exactly. How hard can it be to spin up a footwear brand and kind of, solve this problem? And so, I think ignorance can be a good and a bad thing. And we sort of launched into that. And you asked about what we learned. I think point one there was we knew, so it was me and a friend, and he was a designer. So we got to designing this thing, and we didn't know the first thing about women's footwear. So point one was we were immediately humble and immediately, I think, acknowledged our ignorance. We went and did lots of interviews of lots of customers, tons of research. What's the kind of product that we thought could work? That has definitely stuck with me to FoodByUs. As an outsider looking into the hospitality industry, it's that constant acceptance of ignorance, which has driven, I think, really, really good product innovation, and never ever telling the customer, what we think, but more just listening. So I think that's kind of point one. And also accepting, I think, on the ignorance side that you're jumping in, it's going to be much harder than you probably think, but jump anyway. So I think a bit of resilience and perseverance was the second thing that I learned. And I think probably the third thing was we had an exit. It wasn't hundreds of millions of dollars or anything, but starting a business, building it up, and exiting for something, I think was a really important learning to say, I can do this. And that was on a different time in my life and a different scale to what we're doing at FoodByUs. But ultimately, I think going on that journey over 5 years was good, and was just kind of, I think, deeply encouraging that I can do this. This is possible, and it's fun. And so that kind of is something that I think stays close to me throughout FoodByUs.
I love that. And I think what's really important there, it's something I, dare I say, preach, Ben, if I may, is the first business you do, you don't have to get so precious about it's got to be the perfect product, the perfect place, the perfect space, and all of these variables. And you woke up and you're like, I'm so deeply passionate about foldable footwear. What's actually more important is taking the jump.
Yep.
And through the process of taking the jump, you're going to have all of these learning opportunities. And what I heard is you've essentially got another piece of evidence, which is hey, I could do that.
Yeah.
And now like you said, the scale is completely different, but at least I have little bits of evidence that'll help me jump to the next one. So I've spoken to many people who've had versions of 1, 2, and 3 were, they had to close down the doors, and they essentially the business was, in theory, air quotes, a failure. But still, those are like pieces of evidence, which is like, well, I was willing to risk it. There's so many of those learning elements that as long as you stay in the game, that's what matters. Like not getting the evidence and learning the lessons and going, cool, I'm just going to go back to get a 9-to-5 job. It's like I can layer that in and I can take that to the next one. Those are really cool insights. I really like that. Both of them have been co-founded, so you've had co-founders through both processes. I imagine this time it feels a little bit more like official. It would be, I guess, no, you were doing it for 5 years, so you would have felt very much like a co-founder in the last one.
Yeah, a co-founder, but he was my friend. So I think it was a relationship based on friendship in the first instance. Yeah.
What have you learnt about? Because a question I often get asked from people is like, do I co-found or do I not? And I think there's again lots of learnings from both sides. Like, what have you learnt about yourself, your personality, and the benefits of co-founding?
Yeah, I mean, speaking from my experience, I would never start a business solo. So obviously I love co-founders. Why? Because I'm not good at everything. It's that simple. If you're not good at absolutely everything, get someone who kind of fits with your Venn diagram. What is the Venn diagram as I see it? I think that you have to have, well, in my experience, different skill sets. So you're not stepping on each other's toes, but similar values. That's what I found.
That's
so
cool.
With my first co-founder, he was a designer. I had a sort of law and business background. And so it was quite obvious who did what. It's not like I was advising on the colors or the shape or whatever, And so with FoodByUs, similarly, like my co-founders have technical skills. I can't code, things like that. So but then we come together on the values. So a lot of the decisions become quite easy. I think that's always the challenge with a founding relationship is, who's going to do what and what if we want to go in different directions? How do we respect each other? But still drive this thing we've got together forward. And if I respect what you do and it's different to what I do, we're already a step ahead. And if we've got similar values, so I don't think you're going to do anything that's going to seriously harm the business or that's going to be dodgy or whatever, then we're also another step forward. And then so you're really only dealing with the final, I guess, 5% on what's the nitty gritty of this issue today. So much easier. And founding relationships can go totally the opposite way, where if I'm as good a coder as you are.
Yeah.
Now we're arguing over technical detail. Now it's a question of respect. Who's got better coding chops? What a waste of time. You know what I mean? Like that's not helpful. And meanwall, the customer's sitting there and they can't do the thing because we haven't built what they want. And it's just completely ridiculous. So yeah.
Those are really good insights. I think it's interesting you say values because I had always thought about it from a different way, but you're essentially saying it in I guess, a better way. And so what I had because I was with my two brothers, so we co-founded the business together.
Right.
So 3 brothers were all in the business together. And my thing was we had complete and utter trust that one another was in their discipline and their right, running it equally as hard. So you never had to kind of look over the shoulder and go, are you working as hard as I'm working? Like you had complete trust. There's a value set in that. And then the other one was like we have a shared ambition. Because a challenge with with co-founding, it's something I advise to people is like you kind of have to know like what are we running towards? Because if one person's like I'm running towards having a team of 5 and just I want to live comfortably and a little bit of passive income at some stage, and someone's like I want to make the next unicorn, I want to get a private jet. You're like woo, so something's gonna break down here. But a value is actually a really good way to put it.
Yeah, and then the bigger decisions around risk and whether to take on venture capital and all that stuff becomes so much easier, right? Because if you want a 5-person company, would you take on that risk? Would you take on venture capital? Very different, right?
It's 100%. Share with me, one of the things I've recently realized through this process of the podcast is a lot of the times we're kind of thinking about almost there's certain elements that are like retrospective. We get, I guess, the beauty of time and hindsight. We get to look back in 10 years and you get all the thoughts kind of go beautifully together. And I've gone, actually, I think what's going to be valuable for the audience is like the now. Okay. And so what I'd love to dive into is like, give me an example of a current challenge that you're having in the business and then kind of like the framework of how you think to solve that. So we can kind of get an insight into like Ben today.
Yeah. I think every day I'm surprised and also not surprised. Okay, here's a new challenge. Let me think about one for a minute, just that I think can kind of put the story well. So just repeat the question for a sec. So it's a current challenge and how we sort of think through it.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is go, okay, like with all this information we have, but now we're thinking about something that's specific and might be this week, last week, this month, a challenge that you're facing in the business, whether it be a team growing, shrinking, customers leaving, customers gaining, growing too fast, growing too slow, or whatever that is, because I want to help the audience understand like how you, like your decision-making framework in today's world.
Yeah, okay. So this might be a bit too industry specific, but let me just sort of get into it for a minute. So most of our life as FoodByUs, we've dealt between restaurants or cafes or whatever, and their suppliers, which are distributors, people with trucks and whatnot. So lately we've been talking to the layer above the distributors. So you've got to think of a food manufacturer like McCain or Mars or Nestle, these sorts of guys. Now, we've never really dealt with them. We just kind of viewed them as the supplier of our supplier.
Yeah.
But it turns out they've got a lot of interest in what we're doing. The Nestle's of the world, they really want to understand what our restaurant's buying. And can we kind of market to them? And can we have a dialogue with these restaurants? And you'd think, why don't you? And it's because there's just so many layers in the supply chain. So it's a problem and it's an opportunity. Opportunity is how do we work with that layer of the industry to kind of unlock more revenue. The problem is we don't really know what we're doing at that part of the industry. We are sort of trying to work out the dynamics of where is there money to be made here. So I think problem one is, or I suppose thought process one to your question is, what's the prize? So well, actually before that is, are we solving a problem? And we have, because they're kind of coming to us and saying, problem is we as manufacturers just do not have contact with these end users, restaurants. Great.
Yeah, so they've got contacts. So it's like head supply, they've got contacts to the suppliers,
but
they then ultimately don't know where that's going to go down to.
Exactly. Great. Okay, so we're solving a problem. Is there money in it? Obviously, is the next thing. So, we'd be willing to pay FoodByUs if we could market or contact or whatever. Okay, cool. So there's things you want to do. There's things you're willing to pay for. But then it's about sort of looking at the data and saying, well, what's the prize? If we found a way to monetize that, is it kind of worth our effort? Is it digression from our current business? And not everything that glitters is gold. So there's a bit of that kind of risk analysis, I think. And then it's a question of what would it take to go to market on something like this that wouldn't cost me too much, but where I can dip my toe in the water and start to understand if we just got one of these kinds of deals or this kind of new revenue opportunity, what would it mean to the business? And then it can become, do we need to hire a staff member to do this? Can I, as a CEO, DIY it for a bit just to kind of get it going? And that is often where I think some of the challenges can come is there's always an opportunity and there's always probably a prize, but there's cost associated with it. And the cost can be very real in terms of headcount, but it can also be distraction, which is arguably an even worse cost.
Totally. It's the opportunity cost. Because while I, the CEO, jumping into this to find out for something, there could be something way bigger and way 100% more to the top line that you can solve for.
Yeah. And so particularly, so we've got a team size of 80 overall. And so then I think one of the things I think of next, as a framework is how can I do this in a way where basically no one knows about it? And the reason is it's no good to the team me saying, hey, there's a shiny thing over there and we're just going to go explore that for 5 minutes. Like that is not what they need to hear in their day-to-day. So typically, if I can, I will carve it out and either do it myself for a bit or pick a team member and we might go and do it together just to kind of explore and test and learn. And there's a lot of research, and I've sort of spoken about before, constantly remaining humble and curious to go out and say, right, I thought I knew this industry. I know nothing about what Nestle or Mars actually want. How many of these conversations can we have? And you kind of bring it all the way to the point of, can we close a deal or two? Can we start to prove revenue? Can we do it at absolutely no cost or minimal cost? And then it kind of inching your way there. And it sounds really wise and all that. In hindsight, I can tell you I've done the opposite so many times.
Totally.
So many times. This is it. This is it. And so I'm talking in this measured, calm way about how we go. And it's because the opposite, which I've done plenty of times, is let's hire plenty of people to go after this opportunity to sell something we haven't built yet because it looks really cool and that can blow up real fast.
Totally. So as you talk, I just imagine the meme of the dog and the whole house is burning. And he's like, I'm fine.
We love that meme.
I'm doing fine.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting. And I'm just going to riff with you for a second because I as I hear that problem, I call it a problem, not an actual problem. You get me? As I hear that, I go, is there an opportunity? So for example, let's say it's Nestle or one of the big suppliers. If you could solve the problem for them and create something that's of value, could they then open you up to more distributors in their network? Like there's like almost like when I think about sales, I think about like my approach to sales is very much about an influencer game. So it's a game of chess. It's like, okay, if I work with that one, that'll unlock all of these here. So I'll focus more of my time on that one rather than going to all these one at a time.
Yeah. So the answer to that is yes, but we didn't know how much going in.
Got it.
And so the more we had these discussions, the more we sort of realized, to be honest, in the beginning, when we're having these discussions, like I said, we were talking to our supplier's supplier.
Yeah.
You don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, right?
Yeah.
So does our supplier, who we generate lots of business for, in some cases where sort of 5, 10, 15% of their business coming through FoodByUs, do I want to link jump over them and go to their supplier and even have a conversation? That could go very badly. So the answer is yes, in terms of that sort of domino effect you're describing, and almost like a flywheel of saying, well, if the manufacturers get involved, they can actually inject more money into the whole situation of venues, FoodByUs, distributors and manufacturers. They want to play in that space. That extra money is going to help everyone, get what they want at better pricing or, more awareness, whatever. And sort of like a rising tide is going to float all boats. But we didn't know that going in.
Totally. So one of the things we've talked about, offline is this challenge that we have because of the way the industry is in terms of it's an industry it's had its approach. The approach has worked for many times. And so how we, across all industries like this, how you have to solve that is, I imagine, is a lot of sales where, a lot of business, like tech businesses get to be, it's, marketing and funnels and all of a sudden it's just great. You have heaps of people growth.
Yeah.
I'm imagining sales is a pretty imperative piece here.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
How do you think about sales strategy?
Yeah. Sales in the hospitality industry.
So to get your customers to restaurants.
Maybe let me frame it up for a minute so everyone understands. I'll talk carefully because I know you're a former chef. But look, our go-to-market, I think, is always challenging in hospitality, and by that I mean chefs really prefer to talk face to face, and they don't inherently trust technology. They trust people. They don't trust technology, and so that means using digital means to kind of get your lead generation and things like that, or even affecting a sort of self-sign-up who takes themselves along the journey of switching all their procurement to a digital method is incredibly challenging. And so our sales strategy has involved mirroring really what the industry is used to, which I think is often your first step. You can't just come in and expect them to do things your way. A typical distributor has sales reps. We have sales reps. What are they doing? Literally busting down doors, walking into the back of house, the kitchen. If you do it the wrong time of day, the chef will throw something at you. That's literally happened. And really basically saying, can I talk to you about how you order your food? Very open-ended questions, nothing to do with tech. So sales strategy 1 is mirroring, I think, the industry and how it does things. And I think strategy 2 is really empathetically understanding how do I speak in a language with the person I'm targeting. They're going to understand that this is helpful to them without bamboozling them with words like marketplace, tech, integrations with your pods. They don't want to hear that. They hear that and they think this sounds either complicated or I'm not really getting it, and so I don't really want to talk to you. So a lot of it is that's sort of shared language. But then I think, that's the sort of nitty gritty of it. But we are very data driven. So we're really thinking of how many cold calls are we making?
Right.
What does the funnel look like? And when I say funnel, we break down every single step. How many first meetings are you having? How many of those are converting into an invoice comparison or what we would consider as the next step? And obviously closing it, growing that account, retention and all that. So we'll be able to sit down with any sales rep in our team and say, hey, it looks like you're really good at basically taking lots of meetings, but perhaps maybe you're not closing it up. Like, what's going on here? Are you selecting the wrong accounts? Are you misinterpreting what the customer is basically saying to you about their level of interest in the product? And I think that data can really drive everything. And the other thing I'll say in the hospitality industry in particular is there's always more opportunity with a venue. So the after sale is probably as or more important than the sale. What do I mean by that? Great if I can get you for your meat and you're using FoodByUs for that part of what you procure, but there's so much more. There's your seafood, there's your fruit, veg, whatever. And so we can always get these venues more and more operational, more and more, I think, reliant on what we're trying to do with them. And that takes time. And so we look way beyond the close to a sort of lifetime relationship.
Love that. Love that. A couple of key points that stand out to me there is knowing the lifetime value of a customer and continually looking to push that is incredible, and not to push that like extracting all the value you can until they're dry and close out the store. But but like the
it's
reality
like a
is like once you get a business and they enjoy you and you are providing them value, it's a value exchange. It's like I will continue to provide you even more value, and therefore the lifetime value of them and their revenue earnings increases. So really good to know, because I think a lot of people, it's like about that next win, and then it just drops out of the funnel. And the reality is like there is a pretty significant cost to get that win. So it's far cheaper to actually just continue to nurture. The next piece I think is really important for the audience is that data piece. So I love it, the way you described the different data points there. Why? Because actually in my brain, I thought, from like a sales manager to a salesperson, it's like, oh, you just want to track, how many calls and how many meetings I have. It's like, no. Well, by knowing this, I can also help you. Because like no one wants to, as a salesperson, do 100 meetings and not close one deal. So by breaking it up to that granular, you can kind of see where is it that we have a leak in the pipe, and then how can I help work with that person to get better throughut.
And all our reps are different. Some of them want more volume, and then they accept that some of the accounts are just not going to come on, or maybe churn. Okay, but you're working double as hard for the same result. And others are cherry pickers, and they really think that they're great at nuancing exactly what's going to work. But the problem is, if that falls through, you only had 3 or 4 sort of options. So really, as you say, guiding the team.
It's a balance between. I know the journey from here for FoodByUs is going to be, there's going to be many more years and many more exciting steps as we continue to grow. But I want to take this as a moment of reflection. If you think about everything you've done up to this point and the previous business before, what would you say you're most proud of?
I think one of the big differences between this business, FoodByUs, and Flipsters, my first one, is this one has a team. Flipsters, as I say, I didn't take capital. I was 24, and it was just me and my mate. And we didn't sort of want to hire anyone either. It's just sort of wanting to DIY everything.
Yeah, just the boys getting it done.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what I'm trying to say is the team and building it has been something I'm very proud of. And I think that's helped grow me as a leader, but also in my non-work life, which is really understanding people and their journey. And on any given day, if you're CEO, you're going to hear everyone's problems, everyone's ambitions. How do they think about their life, and how does work sort of matter to them and fit in their life, and how are they growing as people? And all these sorts of things, and the kind of journey that you go on with your team and watching them grow, I think has been really, really, really rewarding. And it helps me sort of, reflect on my life and what I want to do, and, my friends, my family, my ambitions and all that. That's been really, really nice. And then, I think that's probably the main thing. I'm also really proud of what we've built from a product point of view. We started with homemade food, and then it became, you can order croissant or baked goods. And then it's just kind of grown into this suite of features where more than a few of our customers have said, if I didn't have FoodByUs, I'd be out of business. And it's like, oh, that's great. That's that's a nice thing to hear. And you can't always get that perspective day to day. It's just feature stacking on. Now we need to do menu costing, and why don't we integrate with this point of sale system? And then you kind of take a step back. You're like, wow, we've actually built something quite cool for the industry.
Why I love asking those questions, Ben, and I can see it on your face as I asked it, and you can see the reflection happening. Is because that's the thing here, right? Is like when you're truly passionate about business and what you do, it's not just yes, we want the revenue to grow, we want the profitability to be great, but when you can team up like the thing I'm doing and the impact it's creating, and that that the local little restaurant has said like, hey, this has helped me put food on the table for the family. I would have closed down and like won't know what to do. Like when you're putting your heart and soul into something, that means like everything. And sometimes when we don't get to hear that, like you said, when you're in in the day to day, it's really important to come back, because when you reconnect with that, like it re-inspires you and gets you excited.
Yeah.
And hey, like when you're in the game and you love it, like business is kind of life.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's super important to take those moments to reflect, and like the person you become along the journey is like so cool.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and then you get to kind of laugh back like, oh my gosh, like Kai reminded me of a video today where I did it like 7 years ago in business, and he was like, oh, you look like an idiot. And I'm like, but that's part of the game, right? It's like, I want to be look back and be like, oh, I can't believe that's what I thought at that time, because you're like continually growing.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, speaking for myself as a founder, I don't do that enough. It's just always future looking, and could probably stand to do a bit more of that, because when you do take stock of it, it can be really, really cool to look back. But I mean, as a founder, I'm mostly just looking forward.
Always.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like it's like my duty to the earth is to help the founder, help the high performance dilemma, which is always like next. I'm like, hey, let's just sit back, let's enjoy it for a second, and then let's go.
Yeah.
What haven't I asked you? Is anything that's on top of your mind that we haven't covered today before we close up?
Not really. I'm just trying to think. Well, we were speaking about your purpose. Sorry, what's the name of your cookbook?
Eat with Purpose.
Sorry, Eat
You're
with
fine.
Purpose.
You're fine.
We were just talking about it, before, and one of the things you said was, you wanted to kind of put your experience in what you've done and kind of channel that to do something good. Not your money, and not just your sort of, talking about it or a network, but I get the sense you're talking about your actual skill set, right? And I think that's really important for founders or for anyone, in how we give back. So the idea of, I guess, giving money is an exchange, and it's important, and you can go through to these charitable ventures, I guess. Great. But certainly what I've tried to do, and what I think is really interesting, and I really enjoyed hearing your version of this, is take the skills I've learned, which I think are meaningful, valuable, and sometimes quite unique, and then channel that into sitting on a board or helping directly with a sort of not-for-profit or whatever it is. I think that's an important thing, and I like your approach of how you're doing it, which is not just sort of ticking a box, using money, and then feeling I've done my bit, but rather actually your time and experience, which only you have, is a real value add. So yeah.
Well, firstly, thank you. I appreciate that. And secondly, I agree. I think, for, on reflection for this journey, for the Eat With Purpose cookbook, it would have been far simpler post-exit to carve off $1 million. We've been on this mission for like 16 months. Right. It would have cost me, because I'm paying for the cost, about $350,000. Right. When you stack it up, it's far simpler to just in my position, to just hand over a check. But, part of it for me was like, I wanted to, you immerse yourself in, and so you can truly make an impact, but it's also to inspire, because not everybody can have, here's $1 million, go pass it off. But it's like, but almost everybody has something to offer. Yeah. And so, by being able to kind of showcase the journey, inspire the next, and hopefully inspire the next founder or someone who has an exit to be like, okay, I want to do that too. And to be honest, my inspiration came from another founder. So what not many people know is there's a person, I've forgotten his name, feel terrible for that. I don't really. He did a thing called charity water. Okay. And so the concept was he was like, I'm on a mission to make clean water for the earth. And he stopped his job, and up until now, I think he's raised $1 billion for this business. And I was like, I was just like, that is, and they've literally, I think they said 10% of the Earth's doesn't have access to clean water, and they've made a chunk of 10% of that they've sold for. And I was like, that is a life mission and life purpose. And I was like, that is cool. And so he, on that one podcast, inspired me, and I was like, actually being able to inspire other people to do that, the effects that you'll never even get to hear. One day I hope to be able to share with him what he's done, because I can only imagine how many other people he's done that to. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ben, I appreciate it. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Frank.